Well, good morning. My name is Ted Gardner. I'm an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project, and which is capably handled here by our Public Library of Cincinnati and Dennis Daly, our historian and videographer. And we have the privilege of interviewing and getting to meet and talking with Arthur O. Little. And Arthur, born in East Texas in 1918, has lived a long, full life of great production and so forth. Arthur, tell us about your family and growing up in Texas. How long were you there, and where did you go to elementary school, and fun things like that?
We lived about 40 miles from Dallas, where Pecan Gap, the place where I was born, on the farm.
How about that?
And my mother died when I was less than a year old.
Oh my goodness.
And I was reared by the rest of the siblings of the family. And I wasn't old enough to go to school, but there was nobody to stay home with me since my mother was gone.
Yes.
And so the teacher said, well, we don't have many in first grade, so we'll allow you to come to school with your brothers and sisters.
At what age?
And, sir?
What age were you when they said that?
I was 5.
My goodness, in the first grade.
And so we lived on the black land, and when it was wet, you can imagine what it was like. So I hooked a finger in the hammer slot on their overalls and trotted to school 2.5 miles.
For him.
And had a very wonderful teacher, and she was kind to me because of my need, and pretended that I was special, and I just believed it from that time forward.
Really built your confidence. Yeah, isn't that wonderful? Now, how many siblings did you have?
In my family, there were 7 of us.
7?
Uh-huh. I was the baby.
You were the tail end Charlie, huh?
My mother died shortly after my birth.
Oh dear, yeah.
And I was reared by the older siblings.
Mm-hmm. Did you have grandparents there too?
Sir?
Did you have grandparents?
No, actually, I never knew my grandparents.
Oh.
Except for just a short time, my grandmother at an old age.
How about that?
That was the extent of it.
Now, this little school which you attended, how many students, for example, did they have in this school? Was it a full 1 to 12 grades, or what was it?
It was a 1 to 12 grades, but it was a small school, country.
Right.
And mostly farm area, and not a large number for the attendance of the entire school.
Of course.
But it was from first grade through 12.
How about that?
And all in one building.
Oh my, that's stuff of which American history is made. Well, so you stayed right there and you went through that school, all the grades, did you?
No, sir. We moved shortly and moved to a larger community where I attended school at a better school.
Now, did you have you had your father then, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
My father was also a Methodist minister.
Oh.
And we were always, of course, involved in the things of the church.
Of course.
And we think that our family is the greatest.
Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when you got through the grades and so forth, did you want to go to college, or what was your plan for the future?
I desired to, but we did not have the means, and I was not near a college.
Right.
And for a number of years after high school, I did not do anything at all until my call to the ministry, and it was after that that I went to college.
Okay. Now, there are always certain points in a person's life that he never forgets where he was when something happened. Where were you on December the 7th, 1941? Do you remember that?
Is that the time when the war was declared?
Pearl Harbor Day.
I was listening to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and I shall never forget it.
Right, exactly. The by this time, of course, you were out of well, let's see, 1940. Oh yeah, you were 23 years old then.
Yes, sir.
I should say so. And you had already become a minister, had you?
No. I did not enter the full-time ministry until after my service.
Oh, I see.
And I was doing some speaking, and but in going into the service, I had definitely planned to be of spiritual help and encouragement and help to everybody I could.
Right, right.
And I took some equipment with me, like an accordion and some things, and and we had little groups aboard ship that,
Sure.
to begin with.
How did you get into the Navy?
That is my choice.
Okay.
And
You volunteered, or were you drafted?
well, I had 2 children, and I felt comfortable as long as men with children were still allowed to stay home. But when they began to go, I just turned in and told them that I wanted to serve. If men of my bracket
Sure.
with children were serving, I wanted to serve as well.
Well, that was really special on your part, of course. Where did you get your boots training?
Great Lakes,
Oh yeah, went up to Great Lakes.
up on the Canadian border.
Sure, yeah. Well, that was a great training station.
It
Great.
really, really great.
Yes, it was. And wasn't Boots, though, Boots was a wonderful experience. I know I had that.
It was to me, and it gave me insight into, of course, part of our country and a part of our certain interest at that time.
That's right.
That was very meaningful to
Yes.
me.
I
On
should-
the way to boot camp, I was given a rate of Metalsmith first class going into the service, but we got sidetracked on one of the cities between Dallas and boot camp, and the heat went off of the car. They had us just a car with cots in it, and we like froze to death.
I'll bet.
And finally, running at boot camp, we finally made it. And
Yeah, that was a real experience. train
was.
travel during the war
It
years,
sure
wasn't
was.
it? But you know, you grew up through the Depression and the really, really tough times in this country, which a lot of people of younger generations don't understand fully. And I know how you feel about that. So you were really prepared by life's knocks as well as good times, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
And your faith in the Lord and the gospel and so forth must have had a tremendous support for you.
I administered from the time I landed aboard ship, and while we were at Bremerton, it was a time when President Roosevelt came back from Yalta,
Oh, yes.
and I was part of his honor guard
Oh, you were. How about
when
that?
he arrived back, and I shall never forget that.
I should say
I
so.
stood as near as I am to you, and
Isn't-
with him when they brought him in on a boat.
What a great experience, I should say. Your
He was a-
first.
He was a great president.
Now did you go to Bremerton from boot camp? Did you go to Bremerton right after boot camp?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. And what was your assignment there in Bremerton?
We were just in preparation to go overseas, and we were there for some time, and then we came down the coast and picked up more supplies in California,
Oh, yes.
and then sailed from there
Mm-hmm.
out to the battlefront.
That must have been quite an eye-opener for a young man from Texas.
It was indeed.
That ocean and everything else? Oh, my.
We were loading supplies, and the shipyard was there, and we didn't have any duty since we were just loading. They were doing the loading of the supplies we needed. So I got permission, and I welded in the shipyards while we were getting loaded and ready to take to sea. And it was quite an experience,
I should say.
especially with all those beautiful ladies that were
Oh, yeah.
that were there.
There were a lot of them in California, that's for sure.
There were a lot of them welding at that time. We were really in the drive in shipbuilding at that
Oh,
time.
yes, yes.
And it was quite an experience.
So you did welding, arc welding with on the building of the ships?
Yes, sir.
Wow, what an experience. Now, you know, I found it so, but meeting people of a similar age from all over the country, all different parts of the country, different kinds of young men, and that was a building experience too, wasn't it?
It is quite an experience, and because of my religious interest and because I tried to carry on that aboard ship, when I was finally assigned to ABSD number 7, which is the largest floating dry dock in the world,
Oh.
we picked up the largest thing afloat right at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And when this was true, why, we had 1,800 men aboard, and
That's a lot.
it was quite an operation.
I should say.
We had numbers of large barges that carried supplies along with us, and we could pick up the largest thing at float just by bringing water into the tanks, submerging, and then pumping it out and raise them right at sea.
How about that?
And as I told you, I had a rate given me going in as a welder, but it was canceled on my way to camp, and I was there just as a seaman. But got a break. They were putting up large channel iron to run horses on and all to carry loads of this heavy material. And come to find out that first seamen who had first-class ratings couldn't burn quarter-inch rod.
Okay.
And they tried several people, and nobody could really do it the way they wanted it done. So they said, can anybody burn quarter-inch rod? And I said, I can. So it gave me a lift.
Yeah,
and really attention. And Chief Green kind of hung on to me, and we did a lot of things together aboard.
Oh boy! Well, I should say that was a special talent that you had.
I was in the welding and machine shop business before we went into service, and on our trucks we had signs out of wrought iron that said, "We weld everything except broken hearts and the break of day."
That's a good motto. Now, so here you were on this big floating dry dock, and where were you headed for?
We were headed just as close to the front as we were right at Japan. We were right there to pick up these DDs and DEs and others that was being destroyed so radically at that particular time, and we received them day after day. I remember because of my religious interest and because that I become known as somebody that was a Christian, the ship did not rate a full chaplain.
I see.
So I was appointed chaplain by Admiral Nimitz and given space and office space, and I worked with the crew unless I was needed in the office to for the duties of acting chaplain. Had divine services every Sunday morning.
Right.
And we'd have 1 to 25 ships tied up alongside who were being repaired one way or the other. And I'd take my church bulletins and invite all them for divine services aboard our tub. And it was an interesting ministry. And it became really interested when all the dear Johns began to come in, and I had the counseling with that group.
You were trying to heal broken hearts. So you had, as you point out, all these different types of ships that came aboard or came nearby to get repaired and supplies and so forth.
We were in the midst of it when the little suicide jobs almost sunk our destroyer and escort force that we had available at the moment.
That was in Okinawa, wasn't it?
And we had those coming in to for our attention every day.
And they were terribly damaged, weren't they?
I had devotions with the crew at daybreak, as I always did when they sailed out into the battle zone. And a ship one morning, we had devotions, and they sailed out. In the afternoon, we looked out, and we saw something coming, and we said, that don't look like a ship. And they had been blasted. The entire officers' quarters had been blown off. All the officers had been killed.
Oh, my word.
And they were driving the ship and mending it from the engine room by radio up to the, and in order to get it back, it was a terrible set and loss of a lot of men.
Yes. So you had you had a lot of burials at sea and that sort of thing, did you?
Time and again.
Time and again.
We were just right off the battle zone.
Yeah.
And of course, we had fighting equipment aboard our tub, and all the input. We knew what was going on and how near we were to attack. And but we primarily we would have at times a dozen ships alongside that we were repairing, and then we'd send them right back into battle.
Of course.
And they sunk our destroyers and escorts so rapidly, it looked like we were going to lose our entire fleet.
Yeah.
And they sent in the MO battleship with a 6-inch armor plate on it.
Yeah.
And those little suicide planes decided that they were going to take out the big boy. And they would dive on that, and they wouldn't even penetrate it.
No, they didn't.
And the men aboard would wash them off and wait for the next one. Of course, they didn't know what had happened to them. And they all swarmed on that to take out that big ship.
Sure.
And it's just what we needed, and they didn't know it. But it was quite a situation.
Oh, I should say, the ship, the dry dock that you were on, repair ship, was it under attack as well?
We never had a real solid attack. We had some skirmishes, but never really. We were well fortified aboard, and we all had battle stations and all. But we never really were under heavy attack. Yeah. We were back enough, I guess. And I suppose that since we weren't a fighting vessel, they were more concerned about our destroyers and destroyer escorts and the others.
That's
and
right.
they're the ones that we just almost lost our fleet.
I know. That was a terrible, terrible time. And as you say, it was a very, very disastrous campaign. What you're talking about reminds me of that great old wartime song, "Praise the Lord and Pass the Ammunition." Remember that one?
Yes, sir, I do. I remember so well. I had such admiration for President Roosevelt, and always listened to his speeches and his addresses. And one day the ship's radio went dead, and there was a silence. And then a voice said, "President Franklin Delano Roosevelt is dead."
Oh, I remember that.
Now, I cannot express.
I know.
I had looked to him, and we didn't know what was. We were right in the midst of. Looked like being blown out of the water. I mean,
and he was a great wartime leader.
He was a great wartime leader.
Yeah.
I was part of his armor guard when he came back from Yalta.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It was before we sailed, and I was called on to be part of his armor guard to assist him off the boat onto our tub, and then finally to the. It was interesting and meaningful to me.
Of course.
And because I held him in such high esteem.
And he had such a manner about him of confidence and humor and everything, didn't he?
Yes, he did, and he was so kind. And spoke words of appreciation for our service and
Sure.
and all, and I thought I appreciate that from the one man that I look to more than anybody else.
I should say, well, you were especially honored to have that close association.
I felt so. Of course, I don't know why I was chosen. I just.
Well, I think that's pretty obvious.
I was.
You were an outstanding
I was
person.
as close to him as you are, and aided him as he came aboard.
How about that?
And
he had that hat on, and
yeah.
the smile and everything. Well, that is something one would never forget.
I remembered his "my friends," and you are my friends.
How about that? Now, how long were you over there in the area off Japan? You remember how long that was? Several months or?
Almost a year.
Almost a year.
Uh-huh. We were there up until the time that it began to cool down, and fact of the business is, one of our men who was a military policeman,
Mm-hmm.
he was part of the honor guard when the declaration was signed.
Aboard the Big Mo.
Yeah.
How about
the,
that?
The old MO that had pulled him there to
Sure.
help save our DDs and DEs. They were getting torn to pieces by
Right.
the suicide planes.
Right.
And Lloyd Laughlin, he was stood right there at the signing of the.
How about that?
As he was.
Well, we've all seen that picture, of the signing, and there was MacArthur, and there was Nimitz, and Leahy, and so forth, and of course the Japanese signing the document. That must have been, you knew that was history that hopefully would never have to happen again.
We were right in that area. We were just in the battle area from there.
Right.
And it just looked like we were going to lose our fleet of destroyers and destroyer escorts.
Yes.
And had it not been for the help from the battleship, it would have been much worse
Yes.
than it was, and we possibly could have lost that entire battle.
Well, we were very fortunate in the fact that we had our fighter planes and our ships, and of course our well trained Navy.
We were given, after I was appointed acting chaplain, we had big barges that we brought supplies along with us that we had to work out of when we had needed materials.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd emptied one of them primarily, so we made us a church out of it, and we had church boats just a few hundred yards away, and we'd take church boats over to, and we took some of the rough lumber and made us some seats.
And you administered to them right there.
Yes, sir.
Oh, that is something. That's just great. Now, let's back up just a little bit, Arthur. You were a married man. You were a married man. You had a couple of small children.
Yes, sir.
What was going on back here while you were out there?
Well, a lovely wife that loved me and our children, and we just kept close contact, and I lived and loved and served and came home as pure as I was when I left.
Here she was.
And that wasn't easy.
No.
And from that time forward, I began my ministry on my return. When I came back to the States, I wrote to my wife after spending a night with the Lord without much sleep. And I felt like that a multitude of people were marching toward eternity without hope.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was the only one in the world could stop them. And I wrote her a letter, and I said to her, I've taken a new job. I want you to sell my buildings, my trucks, my equipment, and everything that I have. I'm going to be in business for the Lord and no longer in the welding business.
How about that? Yeah.
And I really loved my work, and I really loved to fix things. And
I can understand that.
And but I came home from service. I bought an 18-passenger Chevrolet bus. I signed up for a radio time. I bought a gospel tent, and I was at the ministry from the time I came home.
Boy, oh
full
boy.
time.
Boy, you had it all well planned out, didn't you?
And I thank the Lord, had great success.
Well, I should say that.
And it has been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity and privilege, and to see hundreds of people surrender their lives to Christ.
Yes.
And
yes.
to make such unbelievable contributions to our world.
I should say, well, you are truly a man of God and a man of peace, and a man of patriotism. That is so obvious. Your wonderful spirit, your devotion to your country as well as your family and your God. Did you come back to Kentucky, or did you go back to Texas?
I didn't know. I came back to Texas.
Yeah.
And I didn't wait. I started in the ministry. I signed a radio broadcast contract and took with some young people and began immediately. And then I came, finished my college here in Cincinnati.
Oh, you did?
I came here and took a little church in Ludlow across from City Hall.
Right.
And they told me if I would janitor the church and keep the furnace squared away and cut the grass, I could live in the Sunday school room with 5 children, the Sunday school rooms.
Yeah.
And they'd give me $40 a week.
$4 a week?
$40
a week. My
That's
goodness.
where I began with 5 children. And they said, they talked about those children as the preacher's kids that lived in the basement. Our front door opened out on the sidewalk. And but the wonderful thing about being Christian is those kids that lived in the basement and that they referred to as the pastor's kids in the basement. My oldest son finished his PhD in history here at the University of Cincinnati with honors, with
Wow.
a scholarship, and is head of the history department at Port Loma University in San Diego.
Oh, my goodness.
And I could go on and on and on. They chase all over the world, and all of them have more than their masters, of course, Paul, we have to put up with him here at home.
Well,
And,
I was going to say, one of your own sons has brought you down here and is with us right in this room.
Yeah, Paul takes care of his dad.
That's wonderful. That is so great.
But it's unbelievable. All of them have as much as their masters or more. And the community was so impressed with the family until hardly ever a week passes after the years have passed. They chase all over the world every one of them, from China to everywhere where you think about that you can go. And but the community, since the school had a little bit of difficulty with me because they thought I was too demanding about some of the school activities and such. And but now, since the children have had such unbelievable success, hardly a week passes that somebody doesn't ask me, how in the world did all your children do so well, every one of them? And I always answer, they had a wonderful mother.
Right. Well, you obviously were a great team, and I was just thinking about, as you were saying, the children living in the basement. And you could say, well, they worked their way up from the ground up, didn't they?
They did.
How about that?
They
With all
did.
your guidance and help.
And you've seen the new church as you drive to the airport
Yeah.
with a large sign.
Yeah, I know.
I drew the blueprint for that church and bought every nickel's worth that went in it, and we built $1 million church there. I wish you could see it. And it has been really, from this beginning, it's really been rewarding.
Well, of course it has.
And I take great pride and give God praise for His wonderful leadership and for the opportunity and privilege to help so many people to a better way of life and to heaven.
Now, do you preach every Sunday? And
Not anymore, I don't.
you don't preach anymore?
I do preach.
You do, but not every Sunday.
But I am in charge of congregational care, and I preach lots of funerals, and I preach often at the church, but not every Sunday.
Yeah. You have a good staff and so forth?
Yes.
Well, that's wonderful. I want to find out about that. Anyway, we still have some time here, and we wanted, and I know because you're going to get a DVD, of this interview for you and your family.
Thank you.
So everybody's going to get to see you in action here, and not in the pulpit. But anyway, let's go back a little bit into this war picture that you experienced. On my ship, I served on 2 ships in the Pacific, and my last ship was a carrier, and we had a full-time chaplain aboard. He was a Navy lieutenant, and of course the chaplain worked hand in hand with the doctor, with the medical, the corpsman, and so forth. Tell us about some of your experiences with wounded and so forth.
That is the toughest part of it.
Yeah.
Because we were a working ship and a hospital ship in the area, they were always transferred to the hospital ship in the area. So we didn't actually have that to deal with aboard our ship, except maybe for 24 hours or something.
Like first aid or something like that.
And for that part of it, it was wonderful that we, with as many men as we had, we did not have quarters or anything to care for them at all.
Right.
And they were picked up and taken to a hospital ship in the area.
Now, this was the vessel that you said had 1,800?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
They pick up the largest thing afloat.
You could pick up the big battleships.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that amazing?
Just pump the tanks out, submerge, rudder it in, pump them out. Yeah, there you are.
And there you are, high and dry, and you could work on them at sea.
Lots of underwater welding.
Yeah.
And we couldn't, there were times that we'd have 10, 15 ships that we were working on the side, as well as though we'd had to pull in while we could always work on them.
Sure.
Just to go from one right across from to the, and underwater welding, and it's quite an experience.
It certainly is.
And
Well, those ships, so many of them, of course, were so terribly damaged, as you pointed out, by these Japanese kamikaze planes. How did you deal with the spiritual side of it? Here the enemy was coming at you, determined to kill you, even if they had to kill themselves. Had you ever dealt with anything like that before, spiritually?
no, sir, and some of the people that they hung up the way they did with their thumbs and the things they did, and we got those men in the area there in the ship, and of course the hospital ship. I could go to the hospital ship,
Mm-hmm.
and but we well, some of the most drastic situations that happened was large fires that just burned the crew,
Burned the bodies.
whole crew, and then they'd pull it alongside to
Yeah.
have it. And of course, most of the ships that we had was something that we could repair and send them right back into service.
Did you ever have an experience of an enemy person that you picked up or that you captured or anything like that?
We did not.
No.
I did not, at least. Of course, the tough situation was really. I had devotions. I mentioned, I believe, about the DE that we looked out and just a skeleton of a ship coming in,
Wow.
and they were manipulating it from the engine room. Had no mass. All the officers were killed.
Oh, no.
And I'd had devotions with them that morning at daybreak before they sailed.
Wow.
So we were that close to the battlefront.
Oh, my goodness.
And
That must have been just heart-rending.
it is tough to take, and yet somebody needed to be, and but it just as rough as
That's right.
when you feel as I did. It's some mother's boy and some family member, and
Yeah.
could be mine.
Yes, I know. Well, with your training and, of course, your spirit and your devotion and everything, you knew how to handle those difficult situations.
Well, I felt like that the Lord helped me, and of course my father was a minister, and for a Methodist minister, and I happened to be the baby boy, and my mother having died when I was a year of age, or less than a year of age, and my father, of course, was the parent that I cling to, and
Of course.
the others took care of me.
How long did your father live? Did
My
he,
fa- my
did he see
father-
you come back after the war?
Yes, he lived to be a ripe old age. He was in his 80s, and
And you've outdone him already, haven't you?
I am not nearly the man that he was,
Well,
or the minister that he was, but I've lived longer than he did.
your position in the community here, where you've been a pastor there for, what did you say, 62 years?
Yes, sir.
Wow. What a record! What a great contribution. So you've been a part of the community, not just the church, but also
Very much a part of it.
living there and
Schools, whatever is going on in the community, I've been a part of it.
Exactly.
I mean sometimes not appreciated, but when it affected the moral life of the community, I felt I should be a part. And I made myself a part.
You've spoken out.
The fact of the business is, I remember driving down, I had a big board out in front of the church where I always kept a bullet, and I rode down, there was a big sign across that said, "How little can little be?" So I had my battles, and, but we're stricter, I guess, than a lot of churches are, and I spoke at the school a lot, and a lot of the graduation exercises and such, but yet I had some difficulty with the school, and especially their proms and so much drinking and difficulty, and they kind of thought I was a little too strict, and they spoke of our children as the preacher's kids that lived in the basement. And but they soon were class presidents and other officers in the school. But this one thing I want to share with you, and it's this. My baby daughter was elected homecoming queen.
Okay.
And so they were just sure, I guess, that I would object strongly because of the drunken situation and all that goes on in a place like this, in our community at least. And they knew I had objected to things like that. But anyway, she came home and she didn't tell me about it at all. And so she went in on Monday and went into the the superintendent's office, and said, "If you will, I would appreciate it if you would have the runner-up to serve as the homecoming queen." Well, you can imagine what he said. "What's the matter? Won't your father allow you?"
Oh boy.
And she says, "My father doesn't know." Now you think I don't have pride in that kind of daughter?
Oh my word! What character? What quality? I should say. All on her
Is
own.
the honor of the year, but he just sure that he had her pinned. You know, hey, well, what's the matter? Won't your father allow you? And she said, "My father doesn't know."
Isn't that something? Oh my goodness!
You can imagine how proud I am of her.
Oh my goodness! I should say. Well, Arthur, another short look at your service. You came out of the war with some medals, some battle ribbons.
Or ribbon, but no, I had no actually. Well, we were targeted a time or two.
Sure.
And we had, but I really no battle. Really, actually, it was a working situation.
Yes.
Primarily for me, and with that many men aboard and all going on, you hardly, except for the fact that when a ship come in with 20 men dead on it, why, the situation. that ship that I told you about, it lost every one of its officers in that
Just
DE
imagine.
that I told you about that went out that morning and came
You had
in.
seen them in the morning, and then
They
they were all gone.
There was no bridge. There was nothing stored. They were stirring the ship by radio from the engine
Yeah.
room. It was just clean, just
That
no
is-
no mass at all on the entire ship.
That's an incredible story, and I know for a man such as you to have experienced that is something one never, never, never forgets.
One of the most heartrending situations is fires aboard ship.
Yes,
We had ships brought in with yet plenty of charred bodies
yeah, yeah,
where a fire had just swept
Right. right.
swept the ship.
Well, I want to say this, knowing about you and about what you've done over the years, our community, we like to think, is better for it because of a person such as you and your wonderful family, and what a contribution you've made not only to the community through your family, but to the nation, with all these children who've gotten these wonderful educations and are exerting that in different places.
A daughter we have cares more about young children than anybody I've ever seen. She spent 25 years teaching young children, to the degree that she was recognized by the state and became one of the committee of the governor's committee on young child education.
Oh, wow.
And well, I'll quit because I'll be. But when it comes from the state and they choose her to be on the committee of young child education,
Right.
they don't do that without proof that they're making a tremendous contribution.
That is a tremendous, tremendous contribution. What do you foresee in your future as a person and as a grandfather? Are you a great-grandfather now or grandfather?
Great.
Great. Holy cow. Wow, that is something else. Oh, my goodness. That's, well, you were married young, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and of course you had children right away, and then that, oh, goodness sakes. Well, that is another outstanding mark on your shield. And of course you carry that shield so strongly and have done it throughout your life.
Well, there's never been a connection in our entire relationship that has ever had any kind of difficulty with the law or anything that was unbecoming.
Yes.
Period.
Right.
And of course, we'd have been horrified if I had.
Of course. Did you have any interest in athletics as a person? Did you play ball or anything?
I was a basketball star.
You were?
We won the championship in setup, and I had a wicked pitch from the left hand over the head that couldn't miss.
How about that? Well, this is funny, and I thought about that. You and I played when the center jump was a main part of the game. After every basket, after every free throw, the teams came together to the center of the court, and it was a jump ball and continued on.
Our church softball team won the entire region. Played over 100 games.
Wow.
In this there about 8 years ago.
Wow. Wow.
We have a lot of trophies.
I'll bet you do. You got a case there in the church where you display them? That's wonderful. Oh, my goodness. We've got a few more minutes here, Arthur. I want to get in as much as possible for your family to see and hear you talk about it, because not only do you get a DVD of this interview, but a copy goes to the Library of Congress in Washington, to the archives, and a copy is kept here at the main library in Cincinnati. So you're in the archives as we speak, and eventually it'll be on the web and people can see this interview.
Well, I'm happy to be listed here, but my entire life and commitment has been to be listed in the right book.
Yeah.
And it's been so gratifying and so rewarding.
Yes.
To hear God's voice and to obey it, and then to take an unworthy person such as I,
yes,
to use me. My telephone has been the same for 62 years, the same number, and I still answer it day or night. And I make home calls, hospital calls. And I'm not bragging. I'm not complaining.
No, I understand.
The opportunity to serve has been my goal.
Absolutely.
To honor God and to help people to a better way of life and to heaven.
Well, that is so outstanding, and it's been a privilege for us to hear you and to meet you, and we know that your name is writ large in the great book.
It's strange sometimes. The children's mother died about 18 years ago.
Oh.
And I was alone at home by myself for 8 years and finally married a lady of the church. And a wonderful lady which has made such tremendous contribution to the family and to me. And, but we would go out and maybe in a dry goods store somewhere, and some beautiful lady would fall on my neck and say, "Oh, Reverend Little, you married me." And of all of the hundreds of children that I've dedicated, I married Miss America. Miss Ohio, at our church. It has a 100-foot aisle and decorates so beautifully.
Wow.
And her friend had married there, and she married a man out of New York. 2 plane loads out of New York came to be in the ceremony at the church. And but all of those opportunities and privileges that come along. Right. But so many that, especially the weddings that I have performed, and with my new wife, and we'd be, and just often somebody would become emotionally charged at the moment, and but it's.
Well, that attests to your great heart and soul and personality and love for humanity.
Well, God thinks people are important.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to do God's work, they become increasingly important to you.
That's right.
And what a beautiful and wonderful opportunity it is to serve God and to serve people and to help them to a better way of life and hopefully heaven.
Well, we know God thanks you, and we know that the world that you have touched also thanks you. And it's been a great privilege, sir, to meet you and Arthur O. Little of Fort Wright, Kentucky. And God bless you and keep you forever.
It's been a very sacred privilege for me, and I thank you for your kindness and the opportunity.
Well, it's been an honor for me, sir. Thank you.